In the 8th year of the apocalypse, a time ability user came to me. She said she came from the future, and this apocalypse was a doomed situation for humanity. At that moment, I was out exterminating zombies. In front of me were ferocious-looking zombies, and under my feet was a sea of blood and a mountain of corpses. I condensed my ability, and flames shot up into the sky. I insist on saving the situation on the verge of collapse, if the human race is to perish. The southern base will be the first to be wiped out. 1. When the time ability user came, I was leading ability users to rescue people outside. This base had just been hit by a zombie tide, and the inside of the base was in ruins. I crouched down and picked up a little girl from the ruins. The rescued people in the base huddled together in 2s and 3s, gnawing on dry rations. I sat in the ruins holding the little girl and listened to the survivors saying. There were so many zombies outside at that time. We were all shouting, "Commander, take the ability users and leave, don't care about us." But the commander didn't listen and insisted on leading the ability users to stand in front of us. In the end, they all died in front of us. The commander and the others said that not a single person from the western base should be left behind. I listened in silence. In the 8th year of the apocalypse, only 1 in 10 humans remained. And the survival situation was severe. In the early years, in addition to the 5 major bases including the eastern, southern, western, northern, and capital bases, there were also many small and medium-sized bases. Over the past 8 years, all the small and medium-sized bases had been destroyed, and the 5 major bases had gathered the people across the country. That's when the time ability user appeared. Light waves flowed around her body. And she looked so illusory that she seemed to be on the verge of dissipating at any moment. No one could see her except me. I had reached the 10th level of ability and was currently the strongest human, and I would never be mistaken. The person noticed my gaze and came to my side. She was wearing a tattered combat uniform, and there was a pattern of a red flag on her left arm. I am a time ability user. I put down the child in my hand and followed her to a place where there was no one. In the 8th year of the apocalypse, all kinds of ability users emerged in an endless stream, but there had never been a time ability user before. However, the ability fluctuations on her were too strange, and they didn't seem to be the abilities that had been recorded so far. Before I could speak, she had already introduced herself. I came from the future. This apocalypse is a doomed situation for humanity. No matter how we resist, we are doomed to die without a doubt. Just as I was about to say something, the voice of my subordinate came over. "Boss, the zombie tide is coming again." I rushed over immediately. Within my field of vision, the survivors of the western base had already shielded the children behind them. In front of me were zombies like a tide, a dark mass, and behind me was the ruins of the base. I don't know which survivor suddenly said, "Commander Sun, you take the children and leave quickly, hurry up." I led the ability users to stand in the front, condensed a fireball in my hand, and Grace behind me formed a water wall over the survivors. I charged towards the zombies. For a moment, flames shot up into the sky, and in front of me was a sea of blood. The sea of blood wound around. Not a single one should be left behind. Abilities flew around, and the ability users in combat uniforms stood in front of the survivors. "Wait, after this battle is over, we will take you back to the southern base." Not a single one should be left behind. The time ability user stood by and watched the battle. Only after the battle ended did she come to me again and suddenly say, "You don't belong to this world." 2. She was right. I really didn't belong to this world. 8 years ago, when I just opened my eyes, I was curled up in a building. I was dirty all over, tied up tightly with ropes, and my throat was extremely dry. In a small office, there were many people sitting. Among them, many were still wearing school uniforms. When they saw that I woke up, an auntie beside me came over and fed me some water. She looked at me hesitantly, and after holding it back for a while, she finally said, "Sonny, your parents are already dead. They just hoped that you could live well. How could you go to fight the zombies alone?" As soon as the auntie finished speaking, another auntie immediately said, "Yes, Sonny, although you can control fire, you can't go deep into the group of zombies alone. Fortunately, you came back safely and didn't turn into a zombie. Otherwise, how could we explain it to your parents?" My head ached terribly, and the memories of the original host flooded into my mind. The original host's parents were teachers. When the zombie outbreak occurred, they were teaching at school. In order to let the students leave safely, they lured the zombies away and never came back. The original host had just finished the college entrance examination. When the zombie outbreak happened, she was sleeping at home, and because of the awakening of her ability, she fell into a high fever and coma for 2 days. When she rushed to the school, she only managed to save the teachers and students trapped in the school auditorium. After safely escorting these teachers and students to a tall building, she went out to kill the zombies. The remaining emotions made me unable to control my urge to cry. I drank some water and then recovered. I understand. It had been half a month since the zombie outbreak, and there were zombies and zombie animals everywhere in the city. Even if we were in a tall building, we still had to worry about all kinds of zombie rats. There were not many ability users among the teachers and students. Every time we had to go out to find supplies. Those who couldn't go would check the equipment on us who were going out over and over again, wrap the tape carefully, and tell us, be sure to come back safely. I don't know how many days passed, but finally, the soldiers came to the city. They protected the people in the middle. When they passed by the building where we were, they encountered a zombie tide and had no choice but to retreat to the building. That day, after getting everyone's consent, I took out the supplies and gave them to the soldiers. They didn't want to accept them and pushed the supplies back. When they went upstairs, they found that there were several teachers in 2 offices on that floor who were quietly giving lessons, and the students sitting below were all wearing school uniforms. The leading soldier looked for a long time and finally accepted the supplies and promised me, the country has mobilized all its forces to build bases. Although it is still under construction, I believe it will definitely succeed. The direction we are going this time is the direction of the southern base designated by the country. We will do our best to escort you there. Then, these children will be safe in the base. I followed his gaze. After all, I didn't tell him that at first. Our people wanted to occupy 5 offices. It had only been 3 short months. I told the teachers the news, and they were very happy. This is great. When we get to the base, we will be safe. Unfortunately, things didn't go as we wished. I don't know where so many zombies and zombie animals came from to besiege this building. The soldiers with abilities stood in the front, and the soldiers without abilities also firmly blocked in front of the people. I had a miserable childhood and grew up receiving various kindnesses. Without thinking, I rushed up as well. In the end, several teachers ran to the other side holding a loudspeaker, and the loudspeaker was shouting, "As teachers, we should set an example." Before they left, they handed us over to that group of soldiers and said to me, "Sonny, you lead the students and follow them closely. As long as you follow them, you can survive." 3. When I first arrived at the southern base, everything was in short supply there, and there was a lot to be done. As an ability user, I joined the ability user team and became the backbone force for protecting the base. Among the students I brought, except for those who were really weak in body and a genius who often skipped grades and joined the laboratory, the rest all joined the army. I went to see them once and told them, at that time, Teacher Luo and the others told me to take good care of you. Teacher Luo and the others wanted you to live. The young man in front of me was wearing a combat uniform. Before the apocalypse came, he was Mason, the monitor of Teacher Luo's class. His grades were not very good, and he always spent a lot of time actively playing basketball after class. He should have been full of youthful spirit and free and unrestrained, but at this moment, he stood in front of me with a calm expression and said to me, "Sister Sunny, the youngest of us is already 16 years old. On the shoulders of a teenager should be responsibility and commitment. If I always hide behind you, I'm afraid Teacher Luo will scold me in the middle of the night." I didn't speak for a long time. After being stunned for a while, I heard Mason continue, "Teacher Luo taught me for 2 years. She was always very strict with us, so, even though I was her monitor, I didn't like her. It wasn't until she died in front of my eyes that I suddenly understood that word, responsibility." Sister Sunny, I miss Teacher Luo. There was a choke in his voice. I was stunned for a moment, and then I told him, "Pay attention to your safety, come back safely every time." The commander of the southern base was a man in his 50s. He didn't have a very good temper usually, but as soon as his daughter Yuna came, he immediately beamed with joy. Yuna was young and always liked to pester me and act coquettishly, asking me to take her out on missions. She was very lively. Before the apocalypse broke out, she was in the school choir. Yuna took my arm and pulled me outside. Sister Sunny, why is your team 001 of ability users already full? I was still thinking about joining you. Stop making trouble. You're only 14 years old this year. According to the new base regulations, you have to wait until you're at least 16. Yuna pouted. Okay, Sister Sunny, I'll treat you to some ground tofu. Some ability users in the base brought back a lot of beans. I learned how to make tofu from a grandma. My dad has a lot of points and can exchange for a lot of beans. When I carried 2 pieces of tofu back to the team, the people in the team were laughing and acting out a TV drama. When I got back, it just happened to be the scene where they were shouting, "Welcome concubine she back to the palace." There was a group of children gathered at the door. When they saw the tofu in my hand, even Yo-Yo, who usually talked the least, exclaimed in surprise, "Is this from that little girl Yuna?" "Yes, come on, everyone will have something delicious tonight." There were many children gathered at the door. Mia, who was holding a kitchen knife and preparing to cook, gritted her teeth and actually took out 1.5 pieces of tofu and distributed them to the children one by one. She felt very reluctant. "Go back and let your parents cook for you. My parents are both dead. My mother is dead. My whole family is dead. I was rescued by the soldier uncles." Mia's eyes turned red. "It's okay. If you encounter any trouble in the southern base in the future, just come to our team 001 of ability users. Your big brothers and sisters will stand up for you." That night, I looked at the remaining tofu on the plate. After taking a piece, I didn't touch the chopsticks again. Annie, the youngest, ate and sighed. We finally had something delicious, and well, Sister Lynn gave it all away. Mia gave Annie a glare. "Why didn't you say anything at that time?" "I saw it clearly. When those little guys left, you stuffed each of them with a piece of candy. There shouldn't be many candies left in that bag in your space, right?" "Nonsense." I also looked up. I knew about Annie's candies. When the zombie outbreak occurred, it happened to be Annie's sister's wedding. Annie took a leave of absence to attend the wedding. Fortunately, because there were many guests coming, Annie was arranged to sleep in the same room as the food. When Annie woke up again, there was chaos outside. Annie's sister, who should have been waiting to get married, turned into a zombie while wearing the traditional wedding dress. Later, Annie packed up all her things and came to the southern base. All the candies in her hand were wedding candies. Usually, she would feel sorry for eating one piece. Annie took out several packs of candies from her space and waved them in front of us, showing off. "See, I still have so many." Then she reluctantly opened a pack and gave one piece to each of us. "Okay, these are all mine from now on." After saying that, she immediately put the candies away. The packaging of the wedding candies was very festive, bright red, but it didn't look like the blood spreading under the apocalypse. Instead, it was more like the light that every household showed during the spring festival in the peaceful era. That was the reunion of relatives and a happy thing in life. For Mason didn't have an ability. Most of the ability users in my team cooperated with other ability users, so there were fewer opportunities to go on missions with Mason and the others. Comparatively speaking, the tasks of ability users were heavier. Every time he came back, Mason would bring some eggs to visit us. I didn't want to accept them, but Mason insisted on giving them. After pushing back and forth several times, Mia had already finished making the fried rice with eggs. "Stop pushing it back and forth. Mason provides an egg, and we provide the rice. Let's just eat together. By the way, Mason, I made too much fried rice with eggs. Take some back later. There's also some tofu cooked in the pot." "Yuna, you really made the tofu well this time." I could smell the bean fragrance as soon as it was cut. Yuna smiled. "Sister Mia, when did I ever make it poorly?" Yuna never stayed for dinner. Her father was the commander of the base, and he had a heavy burden on him. If it weren't for Yuna watching him every day, he could even put aside the matter of eating. When Mason left, Yo-Yo and the others always gave Mason something to take back. Mia was a water ability user. Every time, she would fill several buckets of water for Mason and then pull me over. "Captain, come here and heat it up so that Mason and the others can take a shower." As she spoke, the other students also came out. They knew that we would definitely invite them to dinner. So they only let Mason go each time. The zombie outbreak happened suddenly, and the national machine almost collapsed. The major bases tried their best to gather the people, and there were simply no extra supplies. Even our team of ability users couldn't usually get anything good to eat. These students, who were in their adolescence, were always reluctant to use our things. When we were going back, Mia announced something. Well, we used too much rice when making the fried rice with eggs at noon. Everyone will have rice soup for the next few days. Annie had a piece of candy wrapper in her mouth. Okay, seeing that we all accepted it, Mia continued, when making the fried rice with eggs at noon, there wasn't enough oil, and a lot of rice stuck to the pot. We'll use that to cook the rice soup tonight. Everyone laughed and walked forward. From the winter of the first year of the apocalypse to the summer of the second year of the apocalypse. My relationship with Mason became closer and closer. Finally, one day, Mason couldn't help but say to me, "Sister Sunny, can I call you Teacher Song in the future?" I was stunned for a moment. Mason said embarrassedly, "The classmates in our several classes all have this idea, Sister Sunny. Although you're only 1 or 2 years older than us, the feeling you give us is the same as the feeling Teacher Luo gave us." I was a little overwhelmed with surprise. I had a lonely and difficult childhood. I was born in a small mountain village. My father was seriously ill, and my mother passed away. The road to pursuing my studies was full of hardships and difficulties. Fortunately, I met many kind-hearted people. When I was a child, I had to cross mountains to go to school. I had to leave home very early every day. In winter, my hands and feet were always covered with frostbite. Later, I met my esteemed teacher, Teacher Wang. She reached out to me when I was in the most difficult situation. During more than 10 years of my study journey, Teacher Wang led me forward hand in hand. However, in the year I was admitted to university, she unfortunately died while saving a drowning child. Heaven gave her a compassionate heart. She taught me to strive for progress and told me that the sun always shines after the rain and wind. I am grateful to her and want to do something for her. Unfortunately, the last lesson she taught me was, as a teacher, one should set an example with one's own actions. Since you come to this world, you must take on your own responsibilities. After coming to this world, the parents of the original host died for the students, and Teacher Luo and the others put themselves in danger to cover our retreat and died without regret. I looked at Mason and nodded. Sure, 5. Annie was about the same age as Mason, and was even 2 months younger than Mason. After learning this news, she clamored, "Why can only you be called teacher? Our team 001 is a whole, no way. When we go back this time, I also want that guy Mason to call me teacher." At that time, we were on a mission outside. After exterminating the zombies, we passed by a bookstore on the way. Annie took back several copies of 5-year college entrance examination and 3-year simulation, and said confidently, "This is really a good thing. Maybe the apocalypse will end this year." Aren't Mason and the others going to be in their senior year of high school when the new term starts? They're going to take the college entrance examination soon. Shouldn't they study harder? Mia usually loved to play around with Annie the most, so she couldn't help but ask, "Aren't you the same age as Mason and the others? Why don't you get a few copies for yourself?" "What, aren't you going to take the exam then?" Annie waved her hand indifferently. "I've heard from the captain before that they're all students from key high schools. I'm different. My grades are really bad. I went to a vocational high school. Otherwise, could I have taken a leave and stayed at home at the time of my sister's wedding? My sister is really a top student. She's from the Chinese Academy of Sciences. Isn't she amazing? My mom said that she has 2 children in total. The one with outstanding talent should be dedicated to the country, and the one with mediocre aptitude should stay by her side to enjoy her company. She just wants me to be healthy and not do anything extremely evil. Do you think that if my sister hadn't turned into a zombie, could she have made a great contribution to some research in the base? Why was I hiding and crying secretly because I couldn't bear to part with my sister the day before the zombie outbreak? Why didn't I talk more with my sister and my mom?" The atmosphere in the team suddenly became dull. I pointed to the base ahead. "Everyone, don't be sad. The zombie outbreak was really too sudden. No one could have expected it. Look, it's probably going to take about 10 minutes to reach the base." Maybe Mason and Yuna are already waiting for us at the gate. The atmosphere in the team became lively again. However, when we reached the base, we found only Yuna. Yuna's eyes were still red. I felt a pang of panic in my heart. But I didn't want to face that reality. I asked in a self-deceiving way, Yuna, where are Mason and the others? Are they still on a mission outside and haven't come back yet? This mission of theirs has taken too long, hasn't it? They went before we left, and now we're back, but they still haven't returned. Yuna suddenly threw herself into my arms. Sister Sunny, Brother Mason and the others are all dead. The book that Annie had been holding in her hand from the space fell to the ground with a snap. What do you mean? I was still waiting for that guy Mason to call me teacher. Sister Sunny, Brother Mason and the others asked the comrades who came back to tell you not to be sad. They just made the same decision as Teacher Luo and the others did a few years ago. My heart was filled with bitterness, but when the words came to my lips, all I could say in the end was, he was only 2 days away from turning 18. When Annie and the others were on a mission outside, they were in a hurry, looking forward to coming back to celebrate his 18th birthday. That night, the official of the base sent several baskets of eggs to us. These are the eggs that Mason and the others didn't exchange. We think that Mason and the others should have wanted to leave them to you. I see. I looked at the eggs in the basket and remained silent for a long time. For 3 consecutive days, no one touched those eggs. A child who used to come by often saw the baskets of eggs and said kindly, Sister Sunny, I heard my mom say before that eggs will go bad if you don't eat them for a long time. Why don't you all eat them? I touched her head and handed her an egg. Sister Sunny doesn't want to eat it. You take it and eat it. Get more nutrition. The child took the egg and thanked me. Then, she politely said to the people behind me, big brothers and sisters. I turned around and found that Mia and the others were all standing behind me. Mia also squatted down and gave each child outside an egg. Take it and eat it. Sister, don't you eat eggs? I often saw Brother Mason bring eggs here before. My hand paused for a moment. Big brothers and sisters don't like eating eggs now. We think they are sour and astringent. Only the eggs brought by Mason and the others are delicious. How can eggs be sour and astringent? I didn't answer. Instead, every time I gave out an egg, I would say, this is from Brother Mason and the others for you. I specifically selected 6 of the best eggs and asked Annie to put them into the space. There were a total of 6 people in Team 001 of ability users, so each person could have one as if they had eaten it. I also reserved one for Yuna. As for the rest, I decided to distribute them to the children in the base on behalf of Mason, and the others would surely have wanted it this way. 6. In the 3rd year of the apocalypse, a combat school was opened in the base. The students there not only had to learn basic cultural knowledge, but also spent the rest of their time learning how to fight against zombies. Team 001 of ability users, as the non-military team that had carried out the most missions in these 3 years, was also invited to give lectures, the day before going to class. Annie was in a hurry to tidy herself up. Even Yo-Yo, who usually talked the least, asked me several times, Captain, is it okay for me to go to class like this? Sure, why not? We are Team 001 of ability users after all. On the day of going to class, looking at those students in the school with young faces and determined eyes, when they saw us enter, they all shouted in unison, hello, teacher. When I heard this address, I was stunned for a moment. After a while, I replied, hello, classmates. Yuna had reached the age where she could go on missions outside. Coincidentally, she had no mission in the base at that time. After we finished class, she specially brought several pieces of tofu over and said with a smile, Sister Sunny, were you nervous during class? Before I could speak, Annie started first. Nervous? Annie, have lived until now and don't even know how to write the word nervous. Cut, you're a poor student and you're even proud of it. Hey, you little girl, who are you calling a poor student? I'm calling you, blah. Yuna made a face as she said this, then ignored Annie and came to take my hand. Sister Sunny, I recently learned how to make dried tofu, but I haven't made it very well yet. When I make it well next time, I'll bring it for you to taste. Okay. Unfortunately, I never got to taste the dried tofu made by Yuna herself. In the winter of the 3rd year of the apocalypse, Yuna went on a mission with the team. In order to protect the people, she led an entire city of zombies away by herself. In the end, surrounded by a large number of zombies, as a space ability user, Yuna perished together with nearly half of the zombies. When the news was brought back to the base, the commander of the base was convening a meeting with several teams of ability users. When he learned this news, he was just feeling parched and picked up a cup to drink water. With a snap, the cup shattered into pieces. The commander instinctively reached out to pick up the pieces, and his hand was cut by the sharp glass. Bleeding, the commander suddenly came to his senses and looked at the ability user who brought back the news. His eyes were red with emotion, but all he said was, "Anyone can sacrifice. Why can't my daughter sacrifice?" On that day, the commander managed to finish the meeting with great effort. When he asked someone to see us off, he sat quietly in the meeting room alone, hunched over, staring out the window in a daze for a long time. As soon as we left the meeting room, Annie's eyes turned red, and Mia also shed tears. "Didn't that little girl say she was going to bring us dried tofu? Why didn't she keep her word? I was still waiting for that little girl to come back and bicker with me again." Annie gave me an egg. "Captain, give this egg to the commander." It should have been Yuna's. I took the egg and walked back. When I reached the door of the commander's office, I heard singing coming from inside. It was Yuna's voice. Childish and pure, how many heroes emerged. Their faces in the flames of war touched my heartstrings. Not afraid of the wind and snow, bleed but don't shed tears, full of enthusiasm, be brave and never retreat. The commander's voice was mixed in, sobbing. Yuna was his only daughter. I gave the egg to the ability user at the door and asked him to convey to the commander, "Yuna once told me that she has the best father in the world. If one day she unfortunately dies, she hopes that her father will eat well every day." That night, Mia and the others used all their points to exchange for wine. After drinking too much, they hugged each other and sang the song that Yuna had taught them. The sunset glow on the sea is like a painting of youth, spread in the sky waiting for the seagulls to carry it away. The distant sails are beaten by the wind and waves. No matter how much pain there is for the dream, I won't be afraid. What kind of ending is worthy of all the hardships and homeless along this journey? 7. That's when Grace came to us. At that time, a small base was attacked by a zombie tide, and I led Team 001 of ability users from the southern base to the rescue. When it was over, I saw Grace. She looked very young and was not very skilled at using her ability to pour water. Mia asked an ability user from that small base, "Is that little girl only 8 or 9 years old, that one?" "She's already 14 this year. All her family members are dead." I exchanged a look with the people in the team. Finally, I reached out my hand to the little girl. "Hello, little girl, what's your name? We are Team 001 of ability users from the southern base. Would you like to come back to the southern base with us?" "My name is Grace." Then, Grace looked at the small base hesitantly several times. Mia smiled and squatted down. "Don't worry, little girl, we will bring everyone from this base back to the southern base together." When the commander saw us leading a little girl back, he looked at Grace several times. Finally, he couldn't help but ask, "Little girl, how old are you this year?" "I'm 14 years old." The commander suddenly realized, "Oh, 14, when the apocalypse just broke out. My daughter was also 14 years old." After saying that, he patted Grace on the shoulder and said, "Grow up well." Then he went to deal with the affairs. Grace looked at me with a puzzled expression. I looked at the back of the commander. On the day Yuna sacrificed, the commander's hair turned white overnight. The next day, he still appeared in front of the people to preside over all the affairs in the base. His daughter sacrificed. In the evening, the commander sent a lot of tofu to us. Mia made the tofu with the limited ingredients and served it to Grace. Grace felt embarrassed and wanted to serve us some. I refused. "You eat it, build up your body and grow up well. None of us eat tofu." "Why? We don't like it." Grace believed it. After eating, she sighed. "This tofu is really delicious." Mia's hand paused for a moment. After a while, she said, "It's a pity you came late. The tofu made by that little girl Yuna before was really delicious." "Who is Yuna?" "She is a member of Team 022 of ability users in the southern base and also the commander's daughter." 8. In the 5th year of the apocalypse, the capital base summoned the powerful ability users from the 4 major bases in the east, south, west, and north to carry out a mission together. When I received the notice, it happened that Grace joined the ability user team when she turned 16 years old. We were going to go on a mission next month. When the commander saw us off at the exit of the southern base, he patted my hand and instructed, "Be sure to pay attention to your safety." Grace looked at me reluctantly and repeated, "Sister Sunny, you must pay attention to your safety." I called Grace over. "Don't worry, we'll be fine. In this month, you must practice using your ability well. You're going to go on a mission next month. You must pay attention to your safety then, okay? Don't be impulsive, be careful. We probably won't be back on the day you go on the mission, but when you come back, our mission should also be over. Then, we'll wait for you at the base gate, okay?" Annie looked at Grace's red eyes and laughed. "Grace, aren't you going to cry soon? If you cry, I'm going to make fun of you." As soon as Annie finished speaking, Mia hit her. "Your mouth. Can you speak properly or not?" The capital base summoned the powerful ability users this time for the matter of developing a zombie vaccine. In the 5th year of the apocalypse, countless scientists were entrusted with a mission in times of danger. They ate and lived in the laboratory, all for the purpose of developing a zombie vaccine as soon as possible. Now, there was finally some news. The scientists were talking about the various indicators of the vaccine. I was completely confused, and looking at the other ability users, they were almost dozing off, as the most powerful ability user among them. I interrupted the expert's words and asked directly, "What do you need us to do?" The expert paused for a moment and then continued, "Currently, our vaccine is still lacking many ingredients. Moreover, a lot of things are still just speculation. We're not sure whether the vaccine can be successfully developed even if we get those things. We can only tell you that this mission will be very dangerous." The ability users who had just been drowsy suddenly perked up. "Is it really going to be successful? It's just a speculation. Having a speculation proves that the general direction is right, doesn't it? How far is it from success?" "That's right, don't put too much pressure on yourselves. As the saying goes, failure is the mother of success." It's failure is the mother of success. Oops, sorry, I haven't studied for a long time. In Team 001 of ability users from the southern base where I was, the lowest level of ability was level 5. I was just one step away from level 7 of ability, and we were in the first echelon of the ability user teams. Therefore, the task assigned to us was relatively more difficult. Before setting off, Cindy, the captain of Team 001 of ability users from the western base, came over to check our destination. She envied and said, "Damn it, Sunny, I also want to go to Rongcheng. Come on, what would your team members do if you went with us?" Cindy left, looking back 3 times in one step. Annie, this chatterbox, found out the background information of each ability user team within just half a day and told me, "Cindy is from Rongcheng. She hasn't left Rongcheng from kindergarten to university. She clearly never wanted to leave her hometown, but now, it has become an unfulfilled obsession that she can't go back." In the base, sometimes you can see 2 people who didn't know each other at all before, just because of 1 or 2 words. They would look at each other excitedly and talk to each other cautiously. That was the accent of their hometown. 9. Before the apocalypse broke out, Rongcheng was a big city with a high population density. That night, the people in the team cleared a place to rest. Annie stood on the high-rise building and looked down. Suddenly, she sighed and said, "I once heard my sister say that the housing price in Rongcheng was tens of thousands of yuan per square meter, this place where we are resting now. Before the apocalypse, even if I sold myself, I couldn't afford it." Mia chimed in, "Look at what you're saying. Mainly, it depends on how you sell yourself. If you sell yourself as a whole, you definitely can't afford it, but if you were to be broken down and sold piece by piece, maybe you could afford a set of this house." "Well, that's true, but I still want to go back to the time before the apocalypse, even if I can't afford to live in such a house for the rest of my life, at least. All the people around me would still be alive. Who doesn't want that?" Downstairs, there were the roars of zombies. Upstairs, everyone was holding the steaming rice balls that Annie took out from her spatial ability and eating them in small bites. The rice balls that were just a quick meal before the apocalypse had now become a rare luxury. While gnawing on the rice ball, Mia started talking about Grace. Last time I was sick, that little girl Grace cooked a bowl of porridge for me. I have to say, the porridge cooked by that little girl is much better than the porridge you guys cook. It's really strange. What's so different about porridge? Is there really a big difference in how good it tastes? Exactly. Come on, I have nothing to say to you guys who are always messing up in the kitchen. Anyway, once you taste the food cooked by that little girl, you'll know. Okay, we'll give it a try when we get back. There were a lot of zombies in Rongcheng, and the materials we needed to retrieve were in the very center of the city. All the way there, I couldn't calm down. It was too quiet. Sure enough, as soon as we got the materials, zombies swarmed around us. We had formulated a strategy before we came. This time, our goal wasn't to clear out the zombies, but to successfully and safely bring back the materials. Mia immediately cast a water wall to surround the team. We tried to evacuate at the fastest speed. Unfortunately, things didn't go as we wished. More than 20 large-sized zombies blocked our way. The leading zombie animal looked down at us haughtily, and then with a wave of its paw, it easily broke through the water wall that Mia had erected. Mia spat out a mouthful of blood. Then she grabbed my hand. The four of us will cover you and Annie. You guys go quickly. I had already unleashed my ability. Let's go together. Captain, be rational. These zombie animals here are all at level 7. We can't all get away. Captain, you guys go. The zombies are evolving too fast. There's not much time left for us humans. Captain, the materials are all in Annie's space. You guys go. Captain, the vaccine must be developed. The materials must be safely delivered back to the base. Mia turned around and threw her ability at me and Annie, using all her strength to send us further away. We had a lot of materials, and they were all placed in Annie's space, but Annie's ability level wasn't very high, and her ability wasn't very offensive. If only Annie left alone, I'm afraid she wouldn't be able to make it back to the base. My ability was the strongest, and it was also highly offensive. However, in the face of more than 20 level 7 zombie animals, even if I fought with my life on the line, I couldn't protect everyone. They wanted me to do my best to protect Annie and get back to the capital base. In this critical moment, even if I had to die, I had to protect Annie. Annie and I had reached the outskirts of the city. There were zombies chasing after us. I unleashed my ability, and large patches of fire burned the zombies to ashes. Suddenly, I heard the surging sound of water coming from the city. This definitely wasn't an ability that Mia could currently use. She was using an ability beyond her level. Using an ability beyond one's level meant certain death. The ground shook, thunder and lightning flashed, and there were sounds of metal clashing. From then on, only Annie and I were left in the know. 001 ability user squad of the southern base. The first thing that came to my mind was that we ultimately failed to have a meal cooked by Grace together. 10. When Annie and I returned to the southern base, the base chief was standing at the entrance waiting for us. His eyes were red, and he didn't say anything else for a long time. He just said, "I don't know how much Yuna will cry if she finds out about this." I was stunned for a moment. Oh, Yuna is also gone. Grace came back the day after Annie and I returned to the southern base. She was carrying big and small bags. When she saw Annie and me from a distance, she came bouncing over. "Sister Sunny, I found a lot of good things." When she ran closer, she looked behind me. "Sister Sunny, where are Sister Mia, Sister Yo-Yo, Brother Caleb, and Brother Shane?" Annie shed tears beside me and turned her head away. Grace looked at me in disbelief. "Weren't you all supposed to come and pick me up together? Why are they all lying to me?" My eyes turned red. We hadn't even had a meal cooked by Grace together. How could they all be gone? That year, the snow came especially early. During the spring festival, the base chief had a meal with the ability users. I was sitting below and watched as he raised his glass. He probably wanted to say something, but in the end, seeing that there wasn't a single complete ability user squad, he only said, "Let's eat, everyone." The base chief's health was already very poor. He only took a few bites of food before going to rest. Before leaving, he called me over. He walked slowly and coughed. Suddenly, he said, "Back then, when I first received the order from above to establish the southern base, there was nothing here. At that time, the country was in a very difficult situation. I led the soldiers under my command and gradually built up the southern base bit by bit. Many people died at that time. Later, the ability users came, the common people came, and the base was established. I watched as team after team of ability user squads were formed. At the most, there were thousands of ability user squads, but look at how many are left now. 5 years into the apocalypse, humans are struggling to survive in the cracks. There has never been any god, there are only humans who stand up bravely. Since ancient times, the Chinese people have fought against nature and the earth. I followed the base chief's gaze and looked down. Today was New Year's Eve. Even though the New Year's Eve before the apocalypse didn't allow the setting off of fireworks, it still had a lot of the festive atmosphere and was a time for families to be together. Now, there was hardly any laughter to be heard. Every day, people were dying. As he was talking, the base chief suddenly grabbed my hand. That hand was so old that it didn't look like the hand of a man in his 50s. Sonny, my body is almost at its limit. I don't have much to be reluctant about. The only thing I can't let go of is the people in the southern base. Sonny, after I'm gone, the southern base will be in your hands. I looked at the base chief. Just after saying these few words, there was already a look of exhaustion on the base chief's face. Okay. The base chief nodded. In the early morning, the base chief passed away. When someone came to find me, I was stunned for a moment. When I followed him to the base chief's place, I saw the base chief lying on a small single bed. He was still holding a photo in his hand. In the photo was Yuna before the apocalypse broke out. She was wearing a beautiful little dress and smiling brightly at the camera. On the bedside table were various affairs related to the base. The base chief's secretary looked at these things and told me, the base chief's health has been failing since the year before last. He has been holding on. We advised him to take a rest, but he didn't listen. After coming back at night, he would still continue to deal with the affairs of the base. From now on, I will take over as the base chief of the southern base. As long as I'm here, the southern base will exist. I covered the base chief with a red flag and took one last look at his face. Come to think of it, I hadn't seen that energetic base chief who I first met when I entered the base for a long time. I still remembered that the base chief had a bad temper and was always a bit irritable back then. I don't know when it started, but the base chief gradually grew old. He was always hunched over, looking at everything in the base gently and kindly. He had compassion for all living beings. It was a pity that he didn't get to see the end of the apocalypse. 11. Annie became increasingly silent. When Grace didn't have any missions, she would wait for me to get off work every day. On the way home, Grace told me one thing after another. At the end, she suddenly said, "Brother Annie doesn't like to talk anymore." At first, Brother Annie talked the most. Sister Mia even said that Brother Annie was a nice person, but he just had a big mouth. But now, Brother Annie doesn't say a word all day long. Sometimes, when it's just me and Brother Annie at home, we don't say a single word to each other all day. I didn't say anything. I just stroked Grace's head. It had been more than a year since I took over as the base chief. During this year, Annie spent most of his time outside the base. He was blaming himself. Among the No. 001 ability user squad of the southern base back then, Annie had the lowest ability level. He was young and playful. The team was full of noise and excitement. Now, it had all become a thing of the past. Sometimes, he went out with other ability user squads. Most of the time, he went out with those Taoist priests. When the major bases were first established, those Taoist priests who seemed to be swindlers in the past also came, wearing Taoist robes. They were always at the forefront of fighting the zombies. After I took over as the base chief of the southern base, I once saw in the base an old man holding the hand of a passing Taoist priest and asking him about the afterlife. The Taoist priest, dressed in a Taoist robe, talked for a long time. Finally, he let out a sigh. As Taoists, we will surely protect peace with our lives. I chased after him. Reverend Taoist, you haven't received this month's combat subsidy yet. The Taoist priest turned his head slightly and waved his hand. Give it to the children. The 3 pure ones only need clay statues. He had an otherworldly and noble bearing. Even though it had been many years since the apocalypse, he still hadn't changed his original aspiration. That day, surprisingly, Annie didn't go out on a mission either. I made a hot pot with the 2 of them. it was a completely spicy pot. Amidst the steaming heat, Annie took the initiative to speak. I remember that we always used to make a dual-flavor hot pot at first because Yo-Yo and Shane couldn't eat spicy food. At that time, I even made fun of them, saying that they really deserved to have the same surname since they even had the same taste. Now, it's not necessary anymore. I picked up some food for Annie. Let's eat. That night, I couldn't fall asleep. The scenes of that day seemed to be vivid in my mind. It was a pity that the vaccine still hadn't been developed in the end. An important ingredient was missing. When the vaccine failed, the experts stood up and bowed to everyone to apologize. With white hair all over their heads and choking voices, they said, "We're sorry for you. We're sorry for so many of your sacrifices." When the recording was passed on, I don't know how many ability users' eyes turned red. In the end, they only said, "Keep trying." I don't believe that with so many of us. We can't end this apocalypse. Well said. As long as we can end this apocalypse, what's a little bit of bloodshed? Back then, in order to successfully bring back those materials, less than half of the ability users who went on the mission came back alive. That Cindy who had wanted to go to Rongcheng didn't make it back either. Rongcheng is in the east of China, and Cindy died in the far west of China. From then on, the mountains and rivers are vast, and there is no more familiar voice. 12. After that day, Annie spent more time in the base. He also talked more often. After finishing his classes, he would pick me up from work with Grace. Today, when I was in class, I suddenly realized that more than half of the first batch of students we taught have already sacrificed, but in my heart, I still always think of them as children. When we taught them back then, there was still some confusion on their faces, but over the years, one by one, they went to the front line. And not a single one of them retreated. As their former teacher, I feel sad, but I'm also more proud of them. At the end of that summer, the senior students of the base school graduated. According to the regulations, a teacher had to lead them on a mission outside, and then they could form teams. Annie was the instructor for that mission. When I saw him off, I went with Grace. Annie was wearing a combat uniform and stood in front of a group of students with a serious expression. Giving a lecture. After he finished speaking, I walked over. "Come back safely." Annie nodded. "Okay. By the way, I washed the candy wrappers last time. If it rains, remember to help me collect them." Okay. 7 years into the apocalypse, no matter how much Annie cherished those candies, he had finally almost eaten them all. Only one pack was carefully kept in his space. The candy wrappers of the candies that had been eaten were all carefully collected by Annie. Once Grace saw them and silently filled a basin with water. When the news of Annie's death was brought back, I was just helping Grace collect his candy wrappers. The wind made the candy wrappers rustle. The person was holding a pack of wedding candies in one hand and 6 eggs carefully in the other hand. He said, "Base Chief, we encountered a zombie horde this time. The planned mission had an accident. In order to protect the safety of the students, Annie stayed behind to block the zombie horde with his life, sacrificing himself to hold off the zombie horde." The person was still talking, his mouth opening and closing, but I couldn't hear what he was saying clearly. Finally, after he finished speaking, I only asked, "What did you just say?" He said at the end, "Teacher," Annie said, "this time, it's finally my turn to protect you guys. I took the wedding candies." "I see." After the person left, I stumbled a few steps. Grace, with red eyes, supported me. "Sister Sunny, I'm still here. I will always be with you." During the spring festival that year, Grace exchanged a lot of supplies with her points and cooked a good New Year's Eve dinner. I was eating the food in the bowl. There were only me and Grace at the table. I remember there were still a lot of children living near us. Many of them were alone. "Why don't we call them over to have a meal together?" Grace's hand that was picking up food paused for a moment. In the end, she pretended to be calm and told me, "Sister Sunny, many of the people who used to play with me have died while on missions. The ones living near us are all gone." My heart ached with bitterness, and I promised, "The apocalypse will definitely end. I promise. This world has been kind to me. I met a good teacher who guided me all the way forward. She died before I could repay her. Then, I should repay this world. Heaven has given me a heart full of compassion, and I must have the ability to protect the people." 13. When I brought the survivors from the western base back to the southern base, My subordinates were waiting outside. The time ability user following behind me remained silent all the way. When she saw the buildings of the southern base, I clearly saw that her eyes turned red. When my subordinate saw that I had returned, there was a hint of joy on his face, and he quickly came up to greet me. Then he saw the survivors behind me, and his steps paused. He called out to the people behind him and said matter-of-factly, "Take them to draw blood for inspection, let them stay outside the base for 3 days. Let them in only if there are no abnormalities after 3 days. Remember, the supplies must be provided in time." "Okay, deal with it like that." "Yes." I nodded, looking at the documents in his hand. I stepped into the base. Grace followed behind me and looked at the documents, asking, "Are these sent from the capital base?" "Yes, base chief. There's some good news." Before I could say anything, he couldn't wait to say it out. The capital base sent a message saying that after so many experiments, only the last material is left, and the zombie vaccine can be successfully developed. Grace got excited. "Really? It's absolutely true." However, the experts are still looking for the last substance. I nodded, walked into the base, found an excuse to send Grace away, and then looked at the time ability user sitting in my office and said, "Do you know what the last substance is?" She was taken aback for a moment, then nodded, and immediately shook her head. "I know, but I'm not sure if I should tell you. Maybe there's another way for you." "What way?" She stood up and walked to the window. I frowned as I looked at her tattered combat uniform. "I still have new combat uniforms here. Do you want to change into one?" She shook her head. "No need. Actually, you know the other way even without me telling you. That is, making peace with the zombies." The atmosphere suddenly became silent. I said firmly, "We can't choose this path. If we want our race to survive, the only way is to fight until the end. But in the timeline I come from, we've already taken the path of fighting until the end." The final answer we got was that it's a losing battle. Humanity will be destroyed. I stood beside her. She looked at the southern base below with a complicated expression. Today was the day when points were uniformly distributed in the base. After receiving the points, the residents would more or less buy something for their homes. Inevitably, there would be some smiles on their faces. I don't know how long we looked before she spoke again. "I used to be from the southern base too." With just this sentence, she refused to say anything more. I looked at her. "I don't know the future, and I'm not afraid of it. After all, as far as I'm concerned, there's only one path for humanity's future, which is to end this apocalypse, and that's the only path I'll choose. If you really know what the substance missing in the zombie vaccine is, please tell me. I will definitely get it." She looked at me and noticed the photo on my desk. It was taken when all the members of Squad 001 were still around. During a mission, we found a Polaroid camera, and someone in the base took a photo of us. It was the 3rd year of the apocalypse at that time. Mason had died, and Yuna was on a mission outside. Grace hadn't come to us yet. That winter was especially cold. We stood in front of the base wearing combat uniforms, looking at the camera with determined eyes. After taking the photo, we were still laughing. "This damn weather, it's almost cold enough to turn water into ice, isn't it?" Since the zombies broke out, the weather has been getting more and more abnormal. I remember that little girl Yuna likes taking photos, right? Why don't we let that little girl play with this Polaroid later? I found several of them. We can just give her one." "Okay." The person in the base took the photo for us, handed the photo to me, and called out to us, "Come in. The base chief just sent someone to call you for a meeting." Less than an hour after this photo was taken, we learned the news of Yuna's death. That Polaroid camera was never given to her in the end. "Are those your teammates?" "Yes, they were my best teammates." She nodded slightly, as if she smiled a little. Finally, she returned to a serious expression and said, "The last substance is in the East Sea, in the future I come from." It was only in the 11th year of the apocalypse that humanity determined what the missing substance was. You know, the East Sea. The ocean is much more dangerous than the land now. There are countless zombie creatures in the sea. At that time, too many human ability users had been lost. Although we brought back the thing, due to the loss of ability users, humanity couldn't survive the zombie horde that year. Humanity died just before dawn. At the end of her words, her voice was trembling. "It was just a little bit, just a little bit more. If we had been given one more month, we would have won. 14. I informed the capital base of the news. The capital base conducted tests for a month. Finally, the expert told me, Base Chief Song, although we can't see the time ability user you mentioned, our instruments can detect the fluctuations in time, and during this period, through various experiments and speculations, what that time ability user said is true. I nodded. In that case, let's get prepared. During these days, the time ability user had been staying in the southern base. She would look around the base from time to time. Sometimes, she would stop at a place for a long time. It was only when I went to find her that she would sigh and say, I just haven't seen so many people for a long time. After learning the news from the expert, she was stunned for a moment in my office and looked at me. That substance is inside a blue whale. The blue whale has turned into a zombie. You have to defeat it before you can get that substance. Base Chief Song, I know that you are currently the top combatant among humans, but your ability is of the fire element, and the blue whale is of the water element. In the theory of the 5 elements, earth restrains water. Base Chief Song, you have to protect the earth element ability user. I nodded, of course. I will definitely bring back the thing. She had a somewhat sorrowful expression. But in the end, she didn't say anything more. She just said, I believe in you. I believe in humanity. The capital base acted quickly. The next day, it informed the other bases through encrypted channels. In an instant, ability users gathered together. As the current top combatant among humans, I definitely had to go. Before leaving the base, I looked back. I still remembered the southern base at the very beginning. When Mason and I first came here, the southern base wasn't like this. Now, after several rounds of zombie hordes and being reinforced several times, the southern base no longer looked the same as it did back then. Grace stood at the entrance to see me off. Her eyes were clearly red, but she pretended to be calm and said to me, Sister Sunny, you must come back safely. Okay, guard the southern base well, don't worry. I will definitely guard it well. The time ability user followed behind me. This mission was extremely dangerous. However, we couldn't let all the ability users go to the East Sea with us. We had to leave some ability users to guard the base. Several Taoist priests in the base also came out. After 8 years of the apocalypse, the Taoist robes of the reverends had been mended again and again. Finally, they put on combat uniforms. They carried swords on their backs and walked with steady steps. Base Chief, we'll go with you. There was also a 12 or 13-year-old child following behind them, closely imitating their steps. Finally, the child bowed to them and said, Master, you must come back safely. I haven't fully learned what you masters have taught me yet. The leading Taoist priest looked quite young. He stroked his disciple's head with a loving expression on his face, but what he said was rather whimsical. If you haven't learned it, then you haven't learned it. Humanity is about to be destroyed anyway. Just learn as much as you can. The young Taoist priest composed himself. Study hard. After saying that, he let go of his little disciple and stood behind me again. The residents of the southern base stood inside the base and looked at us. Many of their eyes were red. Base Chief, you must come back safely. Base Chief, when you come back, come to our house for a meal. Base Chief, I took one last look and resolutely turned my head. At that time, I didn't know that this was the last time I would see Grace. The day after we left, the zombies learned that we had gone to the East Sea and launched a zombie horde. In order to protect the southern base, Grace used an ability beyond her level and died. Before she died, Grace stood at the forefront of the southern base and smiled disdainfully. If you want to attack our base, you have to ask me, the one guarding the base, if I agree first. 15. In the East Sea, I saw many familiar faces. During the apocalypse, it's not easy for humans to travel. The last time I met them was 3 years ago. It was also for the vaccine. The ability user squad at that time suffered heavy losses. Almost all the survivors were here. An acquaintance came over to greet me. Base Chief Song, long time no see. I hope you've been well. I looked at him. In the 3 years since we last met, all the team members who used to follow him were gone. In a team of 6 people, just like me, only one person was left. I nodded. Everything is fine, as long as humanity has a future, and as long as we can see a prosperous and peaceful world again. then all the sacrifices are worth it. The earth element ability user was protected in the middle by us. The water element ability user launched an attack into the seabed. The seawater condensed into huge waves. I stood in front of the earth element ability user and gave orders. The rest of us ability users are responsible for assisting you. You just need to focus on the blue whale. When necessary, you can sacrifice us directly. Understood? I heard the choking in their voices. The flames in my palm had already been launched. Before the apocalypse came, the deep sea was a forbidden area for humans, not to mention now. Stirred up by the water element ability user, countless marine creatures were surging frantically. With a slash of my palm, the ability user beside me could still joke with me. This smells really good, gosh. I've never eaten so much seafood before the apocalypse. I slashed down with my palm again. Stay alive. After the apocalypse ends, come to the southern base to find me. I'll treat you to seafood. Base chief song. What about us? Yeah, what about us? You can't be partial. We all heard it. Abilities were flying wildly by the East Sea. Countless ability users were doing their best to fight the zombie animals in front of them. This battle lasted from morning to night. I don't know how many ability users died. All I know is that there was a long howl from the depths of the ocean. Then, there were huge waves, and the blue whale broke through the water. It blotted out the sky and covered the sun. I launched an attack at the fastest speed. The blue whale wagged its tail and looked at me. I attracted its firepower. The time ability user had been following beside me. She looked dazed, as if she was remembering something through this scene. The ability of the blue whale was too strong. With a loud crash, a water column sprayed onto me. I took several steps back and suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. I forced myself to stand up and launched another attack. As soon as the blue whale appeared, the animals in the ocean attacked the ability users like crazy. Everywhere I looked, there was blood. I burned a winding sea of blood. My abilities were gradually being exhausted. The blue whale attacked me again, out of the corner of my eye. There was no sunlight left. I was forced to keep retreating. My consciousness was already blurred. I heard the voice of the time ability user. Her voice was so faint that it seemed to come from the horizon. She said, "Sonny, I can only buy you 3 seconds." The next moment, time suddenly stopped. I actually saw countless time fragments collapsing and reorganizing in front of my eyes. 16. The body of the time ability user gradually dissipated in front of my eyes. A piece of paper floated out of her hand. I caught the paper. On the paper were written one name after another. Even though my life was fading away, I saw her smiling. Base chief song. Remember this. We are time ability users. Turning back time is just to give humanity a glimmer of hope. Out of the corner of my eye, everyone's movements were frozen. Only countless fleeting fragments kept flashing in front of my eyes. I saw the time ability user wearing a combat uniform with a determined expression on her face. Her voice firm. "I am Nina, the captain of Squad 001 of the Southern Base. As a time ability user, from now on, I will lead Squad 001 of ability users to swear loyalty to humanity until death. I swear." The fragments switched to the members of Squad 001 below Nina, including Annie, Mia, Shane, Yo-Yo, and Caleb. These were them in the early days of the apocalypse. There was still a bit of childishness on their faces. No wonder Nina was stunned for so long when she saw the photo on my desk. It turned out that those were her former teammates. From Nina's perspective, I witnessed the death of one teammate after another all over again. It was the 5th year of the apocalypse in the city, in the middle of the ruins. Mia, Yo-Yo, Caleb, and Shane all fought using abilities beyond their levels and finally died without regret. However, before they died, they still looked in the direction of the southern base. It was a pity that they could never go back. When they sent Nina and Annie away, they shouted, "Captain, you guys go quickly. Captain, don't be afraid. You're a time ability user. Captain, go, Captain, keep moving forward, don't look back." Annie still died while leading a team. He had a calm expression on his face before he died. All his movements were unhurried, as if he had already practiced it many times. Finally, I saw rows and columns of time ability users. Nina stood at the front of them, listening to the expert above. The expert was wearing glasses and his eyes were red. Outside the base, The flames were soaring into the sky, and there were the howls of zombies everywhere. The experimental building had been breached. And the vaccine that symbolized that humanity was about to peace was damaged. The expert's voice was trembling as he said, "You are time ability users. As long as you want, you can hide yourselves in time. Although humanity will be destroyed, you can survive." Everyone remained silent. Nina spoke up and asked, "What if we want our race to continue? There is a way, that is to sacrifice yourselves to time. There is a certain probability that it will turn back time, yesterday. I calculated that with your current abilities, if all of you sacrifice yourselves, it is probably possible to turn back time by 3 years, back to the 8th year of the apocalypse. You have to think carefully. If you choose to sacrifice to time, you will be erased at the very moment when the apocalypse begins. It is also possible that if we start over, humanity will still be destroyed." As soon as the expert finished speaking, he shed tears, surprisingly. The time ability users below laughed. "Is that all? So what if we will be destroyed again? It can't be worse than it is now. Even if I die, I will fight for another chance for humanity. It's just a sacrifice, isn't it? I'll be the first one. Brothers, let's have a drink together in the next life." After saying that, the person directly activated his time ability. Countless dust particles exploded. Time kept stealing his life, his hair turned white, and he became extremely old. When I looked again, he was gone. The time ability users sacrificed one after another. Time kept twisting, and finally, it gradually returned to calm. Nina opened her eyes in the middle of the chaos. She saw that all the time ability users who had sacrificed died just when the apocalypse broke out. Their last glance was nothing more than looking at their parents and relatives. Just with that one glance, their eyes were already red. "I came across time, but I can no longer know your future. You are the tomorrow that I can never catch up with. You might die in the blink of an eye, but after all, I have won a glimmer of future for humanity. I have no regrets in my life." Nina kept shuttling through time. Just when she thought she was going to disappear into the flow of time, she saw me in the middle of the ruins. She walked over and was almost in tears. "I am a time ability user, 17. Nina's voice was distant and firm. "Base Chief Song, these will be your 3 seconds." I leaped up and launched towering flames at the blue whale. The 3 seconds passed in an instant. The blue whale kept screaming. All the ability users launched their abilities at it. The earth element ability user had already stood at the forefront. When the blue whale fell, there was a heavy rain in the world. I looked back, and Nina was already gone. All that was left in my ears was her words, "Base Chief Song, remember this. We are time ability users. Turning back time is just to give humanity a glimmer of hope. Even if I have to die 9 times, I will never regret it." She came across time. Because of her powerful ability, she didn't disappear into the flow of time at the first moment, but she finally disappeared before the dawn of humanity. I put away the piece of paper that Nina gave me. "Your contributions will be forever remembered by humanity." After the ability users launched a few more abilities, they went over to search through the blue whale's body. Among the Taoist priests who came out together, only the young Taoist priest was left standing there, supporting himself with his sword. When he saw me, he tried hard to force a smile. "Base Chief Song, did we succeed?" "Yes." The blue whale's body was huge. When it fell, the ground shook, but no one was afraid. Their faces were all filled with joy. When a whale falls, all things thrive. He let out a sigh of relief. "It's finally over. My senior brothers are all gone. What should I do in the future?" They knew more than me. I just wanted to muddle through life. These words almost made me burst into tears. When we returned to the capital base, the base chief of the capital base specially led people to wait for us outside. Even after I went in, the base chief was still looking behind him. He looked at me uncertainly and asked hesitantly, "Base Chief Song, did you come here in several batches?" I shook my head. "The others are all dead. Just a few days ago, we were all on our way to the East Sea together." Many ability users had just finished their missions and were resting in the base. After receiving the news, they left the base without hesitation, but they also died by the East Sea. They might have traveled thousands of kilometers, but the battle only lasted a few hours. There were too many zombie creatures in the ocean. It was a fight where they risked their lives and exchanged their lives for victory. The base chief of the capital base was taken aback and walked with me to the back of the ability users. He handed me a piece of news in his hand. I felt an inexplicable sense of repulsion. In the end, I still opened it. It contained the news of Grace's death. My hand holding the paper kept tightening. The base chief held back for a long time and could only say, "Please accept my condolences." I took a moment to compose myself. I just think that I'm really not good at raising children. In just 8 short years, holding the paper in my hand, it felt as if I had lived a whole lifetime. I rushed over immediately. The 5th year of the new era. It has been nearly 5 years since the successful development of the zombie vaccine. In the Great Battle by the East Sea 5 years ago, the ability users suffered heavy losses. In these 5 years, with the successful development of the vaccine, the national machinery has returned to normal. I stepped down from the position of base chief. Currently, I am working as a teacher. It is spring now, with lush branches and leaves. Every place where humans live is full of vitality. The students in the classroom are chattering about the several major martyrs cemeteries in the country. The martyrs cemetery in our southern base is already very large. My mother told me that during the 8 years of the apocalypse, I don't know how many ability user squads in the southern base sacrificed. The one by the East Sea is now the largest in China. I read in a book that many ability users traveled across more than half of China to go there for support, but they died by the East Sea without even leaving a single word. I also read that many of them were only in their teens when they died. My father said that there was no room for children in the apocalypse. In the last zombie horde before the end of the apocalypse, Sister Grace, who had talked with me, died. Sister Grace wasn't very old either. I stood at the door and listened for a while. The teacher of the next class passed by me holding books and asked, "Teacher Song, what are you looking at?" "I'm looking at the future, and also at you and me in the past." I walked out of the sea of corpses and blood. What still lingers in front of my eyes is the time when I hid in the high-rise buildings with Mason and the others. It's also the noisy chatter of Annie and the others that seemed almost in my ears. It's the tofu made by Yuna and Grace's red eyes. I dare not go to the martyrs cemetery. There are too many comrades there. Nina and the others are also among them. We never met them in person, but we are indebted to them. If they knew that humanity had truly won, they should be able to rest in peace with a smile under the 9 springs. The school bell rang. I knocked on the podium and opened the book. Today we will talk about the 8th year of the apocalypse. Although the apocalypse has ended, none of us can forget that period of history. While remembering it, please also move forward, because during the 8 years of the apocalypse, humans were fearless in the face of death in order to continue the survival of the race, which has now brought back the hustle and bustle of the world, national peace, and people's security. The road we have come through is filled with the sufferings of the nation. Salute to humanity. Story 2. My mom and sister were always scheming, treating me like a workhorse, ready to trade me for a bottle of water to the old man downstairs when the apocalypse hit. In this new life, I sold the house first and hid in the mountains, thinking of harming me and taking advantage of me again. Hilarious. Go fight over scraps with the zombies. 1. I suddenly opened my eyes, as if waking from a nightmare. The bone-chilling pain was still present, as if the sharp teeth of zombies were still tearing at my flesh. But as my consciousness cleared, I realized it was all not reality but fragments of memories from my past life. I had been reborn. Natalia, hurry up and get up. Mom says she can't get a taxi and needs you to help carry some stuff. Paige's impatient voice came from outside the door. Then she immediately switched her tone. Oops, brother, I just went out the door. Haha, who's there? I'm an only child. Remember, listening to Paige's contrived voice, I finally woke up fully. In the previous life, during the zombie apocalypse, I remembered how she and our mother were always cautious around me, afraid that I would take their food, and when I was desperately hungry and weak, they treated me as a bargaining chip, handing me over to the bald old man downstairs just for a bottle of water. Natalia, you should be grateful you still have some value. Paige had a smug look on her face as she quickly went back to her room with Mom, and the old man treated me as his plaything, indulging his desires on me. I couldn't bear the humiliation and seized the opportunity to pull him down the building, where we were surrounded by swarming zombies. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and suppressed my anger and bitterness. I got up, dressed, and left the house. As a freelance game designer, I could do my work from home, which meant I had plenty of time and money. After leaving home, I began to devise a new survival strategy. Since fate had given me a second chance, I would not let others manipulate me again. At the entrance of the mall, my mom started complaining nonstop as soon as she saw me, saying I was too late and she had been out in the sun for too long. Mom, calm down. I appeased her with a smile, just like in my previous life. Why did you buy so much? Was there a sale at the mall? What, you feel bad spending your money? Mom rolled her eyes and huffed. Isn't this all for our home? The mall is relocating, everything is on discount. When else should I buy? I nodded in agreement. Back home, Mom and Paige immediately started trying on the new clothes they bought. As usual, there was nothing for me. I didn't mind. I quickly found the property deed, tucked it into my pocket, and prepared to leave. Where are you going? I quickly put on a smile. I've thought it over. Mom, you're right. We're family. You've always said I should use my recent bonus to buy Paige a house too, so I'm going to go put down the deposit. Oh, and sis, hand me your ID too. Hearing this, Mom and Paige exchanged glances, then looked at me warmly. That's right, you can help your sister with the mortgage later. It'll be easier for her. Sisters should help each other out. Just wait, I'll come with you. Since Paige was overweight and disliked moving, especially in the hot weather outside, after getting the documents, I shook my head at Mom. Mom, you and sis stay home. Someone is coming to fix the air conditioning soon. No one can be absent from home. So when I get back, I'll give you the documents and you can go ahead and register directly. Mom glanced hesitantly at Paige. Paige, akin to a novice in life, still needed her parents to be with her to open the door to strangers at the age of 32. Seeing no objections from them, I took the opportunity to leave. Upon reaching the real estate center, I immediately proposed selling my current apartment. This apartment was bought outright with the earnings from my first independently created game during college. 10 years have passed, and because it's still located in a prime school district, its value has significantly increased, due to my urgency. I set the price at 10% below market rate, and in less than half an hour, I found a buyer. I candidly admitted to being financially drained by my family, and luckily, the buyer had a similar situation and promised to keep the transaction from my mother and sister until I was more settled. She mentioned that she was buying the property purely as an investment and seldom visited. After a smooth transaction, I gave the agent an extra 20,000 yuan to handle something for me. In the evening when I returned home, I handed the pre-sale contract to my mom and Paige. Seeing their excitement, I seized the moment to speak. Mom, the agent mentioned that there's another unit next door available at 70% of this unit's price. It'd be great for you to live next door when sister gets married. Upon hearing this, Mom was intrigued. So, you? Unfortunately, I'm out of money now, I sighed. The down payment for this apartment alone is 700,000, and along the way, I also renewed your and sister's insurance. Sadly, I'm out of money. How about this? I have a partner who has been wanting me to lead a game development project at his place. It's just for 2 months and he's offering 300,000. Maybe you could contribute a little more later. The down payment for that apartment is lower, only 500,000. Hearing this, they were both immediately interested and even urged me to go the next day. Pretending to be reluctant, I returned to my room, started packing my luggage and all my documents, and left home overnight. Seeing the continuous messages from Mom and Paige on my phone, urging me to ask for money before working, I scoffed and checked into a hotel. The next day, the agent called, informing me about a suburban cave hotpot restaurant up for sale and asked if I was interested. I rushed over immediately. The agent explained that the owner originally wanted to create something unique. However, due to its remote location and high prices, it didn't attract many customers. Reluctantly, the owner decided to sell the place. It took over 2 hours by car with the agent to get there. But as soon as I saw the entrance of the cave, I was intrigued. The entrance was fitted with a custom-made blast-proof door that was 70 centimeters thick. Walking less than 2 meters forward, the space opened up dramatically, divided into several sections, fully enclosed with only artificial lighting as the sole light source. This place was originally an abandoned air raid shelter. The owner bought it and renovated it himself to run the business. He even installed an independent power and ventilation system, so operating here wouldn't be a problem. The area totals 800 square meters, and in an attempt to offer freshness, the owner also allocated a section for growing vegetables and fruits, which he initially planned to remove but decided against it since he was eager to sell. With the agent's introduction, I quickly understood the layout of the hot pot restaurant. I like this place. I only have one question. I raised my hand. Can I get a loan? The agent was surprised by my quick decision but immediately contacted the owner. After negotiating without any issues, I paid a down payment of 7,500,000 yuan and tearfully signed a loan contract for over 10 million yuan. After the agent left, I finally breathed a sigh of relief. With my living arrangements sorted out, now all that's left are daily necessities. With the apocalypse looming, the city is bound to descend into chaos. By then, whether it's luxury villas or suburban buildings, all will be targets for attacks. After all, in the apocalypse, we must guard against more than just people. I calculated the money I had on hand. I sold the house for 12 million. I also cancelled the large insurance policies I had paid for my mom and Paige, added the funds and treasury bonds I was liquidating, along with some liquid cash on hand and the recent dividends from a game. After paying off 7.5 million just now, I still had over 20 million left. I gritted my teeth and contacted a few companies to sell several games I still held, and received immediate offers. I chose the company with the highest offer and arranged to sign the contract that afternoon, barely allowing myself another sigh of relief. Luckily, the door to the bunker was painted to blend in with the mountainside. After memorizing the location, I was ready to drive back when Paige called. Natalia, did you get the money? Mom's heading to the real estate center soon. Hearing this startled me, and I quickly responded, don't let Mom make that trip. I just transferred the money to the agent. I spoke with the owner and he's giving me an extra month for 600,000. On the other end, Paige scoffed, so, you made an extra 100,000, right, send it over later. Mom's been craving Western food. We can go out tonight, eating your head off. I made the excuse of having a meeting to hang up first. The apocalypse is nearly upon us, and we're still talking about eating. After dealing with that, I immediately drove to the city center. The gaming company was efficient. After signing the contract, I sold the package of 5 games for another 20 million. Clutching my phone, I then rented a large warehouse, although it had its own power system. Just to be safe, I bought 500 large-scale solar-powered generators online, along with boxed water purification equipment and water treatment tools. Online shopping is so advanced these days, people even buy the Calabash Brothers online. Nothing is too strange to purchase. I bought 50 boxes each of nuts, protein powder, compressed biscuits, candied fruits, chocolate, and various types of ready-to-eat jerkies. Flour is essential. I heard that in times when cooking is inconvenient, eating flour can keep you alive. For energy reserves, which aren't sold online, I had to shop around different markets. For items like gas cylinders, I claimed they were for company outdoor activities and bought 5 boxes from each supermarket. Accumulating 100 boxes, I couldn't waste the small garden cultivated by the previous owner, so I bought various vegetable seeds and even hired someone to buy 50 each of chickens, ducks, and rabbits. These animals grow fast and would ensure a steady supply of meat. I also stocked up on commonly used emergency supplies like hemostatic powder and life ropes, as well as medicines. Struck by an idea, I ordered several boxes of medicines online, even remembering to buy seeds for medicinal herbs. Western medicines eventually expire, but growing my own herbs would give me extra peace of mind. Heaters, refrigerators, upright air conditioners, and other common electrical appliances, I bought 10 of each. I directly purchased 100 units of multifunctional tools and surveillance equipment. In the coming days, would be running wires and installing surveillance systems myself. Doing it personally felt safer. For clothing, shoes, and bedding, I bought 200 sets. Fearing I hadn't bought enough, I even referenced a few post-apocalyptic novels to see what others bought. In one afternoon, I spent over 20 million on shopping alone. Although it was painful to spend so much, it was better than not being able to bleed in the future. Some of the supplies that arrived the same day were hauled back to the bunker by truck under cover of night, and then I drove the truck back immediately. Over the next few days, I visited various markets to purchase items that were not available online, and I also bought a few cats and dogs for companionship, as living alone can be quite lonely. While I was busy moving supplies back and forth, my mother called me again. Looking at the constantly ringing phone, I had a bad feeling. "Natalia, what on earth are you up to?" On the other end of the phone, my mother's voice suddenly rose, filled with anger and accusation. I asked around, and they said you haven't paid or booked any house. What are you really doing? Are you secretly using the money for something else? At that moment, I was sitting in a corner of the warehouse, surrounded by recently purchased supplies, listening to my mother's stern questioning. Yet I was calm. "No," I suddenly laughed. "I just don't want to keep spending money on you." There was a brief silence on the other end of the phone, followed by a flood of curses and insults. Those malicious words were like sharp blades trying to cut through the defenses I had built inside, but I just listened quietly, letting my mother and Paige vent without affecting me in the slightest. "Are you done yelling, Mom? You've always favored Paige since we were kids. No matter how expensive her desires, you always fulfilled them. As for me, even a small request required countless efforts and often ended in disappointment." My tone was even, as if I was discussing something that didn't involve me. "You've always treated me like a weed, as if Paige was your only daughter. You would sacrifice even my life for her. I'm tired of living like this." After saying that, I hung up the phone and blocked their numbers. Doing what I had long wanted to do brought a pang of sorrow to my heart. I closed my eyes, trying to calm my emotions. Suddenly, I remembered the surveillance system installed at home. After hesitating, I decided to turn it on. On the screen, Mom and Paige were having a heated discussion. If it weren't for her parents' insurance money, I wouldn't bother with her. Mom's voice came through the screen, and my heartbeat sped up. It turned out I wasn't Phoebe's daughter at all. My biological mother was Phoebe's sister, my aunt. An accident had taken my biological parents' lives. Faced with inheriting a sizable estate and substantial insurance money, Phoebe had chosen to adopt me, and that money had long been spent on herself and Paige. "So that's how it is," I murmured to myself with a cold smile. Not being loved was not without reason, and not being cherished was never my fault. Something in my heart suddenly felt relieved. I took one last look at the surveillance screen and turned it off. If that's how it is, then don't blame me for being ruthless. I immediately called the buyer of the previous house, telling them I was settled in. Understanding my hint, they cheerfully told me they would bring people over the next day. As I kept busy purchasing and checking for anything missing, early the next morning, Phoebe and Paige were awakened by knocking, cursing under her breath. Phoebe thought it was me returning, but when she opened the door, she was met by a dozen burly men. Through them, they finally learned that I had sold the house. Phoebe tried to deny it, but seeing the men clenching their fists, I reluctantly packed up and left with Paige. As I was delivering the last of the supplies back to the bomb shelter and checking the water collection system, my phone vibrated non-stop. Phoebe and Paige tried to reach me through countless calls. I didn't pick up any of them, only managing to send a quick message while setting up the surveillance equipment. LOL. Then I turned off my phone and switched to another one to play a radio drama. After installing all the surveillance and electrical systems, I conducted the tests and then closed the bomb shelter door. Tomorrow is the final day. The apocalypse is upon us. I converted one of the compartments in the shelter into a bedroom. For the first time, I didn't have to wake up early to make breakfast, rush to finish projects, or constantly do house chores and take care of a disabled person older than me. After a comfortable sleep in, I made myself a sandwich and heated up a cup of milk. My phone pinged, catching my attention. Just like in my previous life, there was a news alert about a man who ate zombie deer meat and went mad, his eyes glazed and walking unsteadily. A passerby tried to help him but was bitten on the throat by the man. The mutation had begun. The news spread quickly, and the authorities immediately issued emergency warnings, advising everyone to stock up on food and stay indoors. Online, there was panic everywhere, and some people, recklessly, continued to crack jokes for fun. Some even dared to provoke the zombies on the streets. but their live streams were quickly cut off, leaving only the screams of the viewers and sounds of chewing to be heard. I took a deep breath and quickly switched accounts, only to see Paige's secondary account filled with her pleas for help. I figured it was about time, so I called Paige. Paige picked up, still confused. But as soon as she heard my voice, she started cursing. "Are you with Mom?" I spoke calmly, ignoring Paige's swearing. "I'm currently in El City, and things aren't great here, but I had rented a warehouse intending to turn it into a studio. If you and Mom can still make it, hurry over." "Are you serious?" Paige was skeptical. I sighed. "What time do you think it is to still doubt me? If it really doesn't work, let Mom check it out first. And if there's no problem, then you can follow." "How does that sound?" After hearing my suggestion, Paige immediately asked for the warehouse address and the location of the keys. Before hanging up, she didn't forget to threaten me, saying if I lied, I shouldn't even think about coming home. Hilarious, as if I cared. Paige quickly shared the information with Phoebe. I must say, although Phoebe can be difficult with me, she dotes on her daughter immensely. She indeed arrived alone at the warehouse I had stocked up. And the battery-powered surveillance cameras I had installed recorded everything as Phoebe entered, finding several boxes of mineral water, instant noodles, and nearing expiration bread inside. Phoebe, though still cursing, immediately called Paige. Paige soon arrived at the warehouse. The number of zombies in our city wasn't too high yet, making travel not so difficult. "Mom, how can we just eat this stuff?" Paige started to get cranky again. "I want steak." "Oh, my dear." Facing Paige, Phoebe was always overly sympathetic. "Let me call Natalia." What did I tell her? Even if she throws a tantrum, she wouldn't really cut ties with us. We're her only family. I really felt like confronting them. Each person faced a tough challenge, only to realize they had misunderstood the situation. Grinding my teeth, I couldn't help but sneer before posting a message on my social media account using a pseudonym. It included a photo of the breakfast I was currently enjoying, and soon after, many messages flooded in. These were from the workers who had helped me move goods in the past, many of whom knew about my warehouse stocked with food. However, they were unaware of where I had shipped the goods subsequently. Faced with threats that were crude and explicit, I informed them that I had already left, but that there was still a lot of food left in my old warehouse which they needed to hurry and divide among themselves. I then stopped responding to their messages. Through the camera, I saw Paige fussing over the taste of the bread. I sneered quietly to myself, "Pick away, as soon you won't have the chance to be so choosy." As I expected, despite the risks, the workers made their way to the warehouse. They quickly realized something was amiss when they found the door securely locked. Paige was the first to sense that something was wrong and pushed Phoebe to check out the situation. Although Phoebe was scared, she figured out what was happening and cursed loudly. "Are you kidding me? You think you still deserve to eat? Go eat." Even through the camera, I could feel Phoebe's fierceness. After all, she used to curse at me in the same way a long time ago. However, the workers didn't continue to smash the door, but instead, there were painful screams. When I switched to the external warehouse surveillance, I realized that some of them had turned into zombies. They were gruesomely searching for new prey, and several bodies on the ground were unnaturally twisting, some flipping over 180 degrees, their eyes wide open but without pupils, drooling incessantly from their gaping mouths. Through a crack in the warehouse, Phoebe saw them and was so frightened that she fell to the ground. Regaining her composure, she clung to Paige in terror. I watched quietly as they panicked. In my past life, when I was being devoured by zombies after falling with an old man, I clearly saw Paige and Phoebe peering out the window. They had smiles on their faces then, as if the person dying was just an insignificant ant, not someone who had been with them for over 20 years. "Thinking you're safe now, TSK. After the zombie outbreak comes the extreme cold, and the warehouse is full of gaps and lacks any warming items. I'm curious to see how they'll survive now." Phoebe and Paige's food supply quickly dwindled. Paige kept trying to contact me until her phone died. Watching them argue over a small piece of moldy bread was strangely satisfying. I joyfully slurped down 3 big bowls of seaweed and shrimp soup. "You damn thing. I am your mother. You should be letting me have it. Don't you know? What does it matter that you're my mom, even if I am your own child? You don't let me have it." Aren't you afraid I might starve to death? You, with your height of 1.5 meters and weight of 250 pounds, your fat can sustain you for a while. I'll die if I don't eat soon. Phoebe was grinding her teeth. Her face had lost all traces of the sophisticated demeanor she once had in front of me. Her hair was a mess, her eyes sunken, and she had lost a lot of weight, looking haggard and fierce. Paige had visibly lost weight during this period, too. I almost wanted to laugh. Paige had always been obsessed with losing weight and had even asked me to supervise her, but when I actually did, she accused me of trying to starve her to death. The next day, if she hadn't lost a pound, she would blame others, claiming that's why she couldn't slim down and meet the guys she liked online. The two fought over the remaining food, neither willing to give in, until Phoebe, with a strong push, knocked Paige against the wall. You ungrateful daughter. If I starve to death because of you, I won't let you off even as a ghost. Cursing, Phoebe picked up the bread that had fallen to the ground and was about to eat it. Furious, Paige, with blood-red eyes, got up from the ground and lunged at Phoebe. They quickly began to wrestle. Despite Paige's larger size, she wasn't very strong and was soon subdued by Phoebe. She pinned Paige down, hands tightly around Paige's neck. You wretch, I gave birth to you, raised you, and this is how you repay me. I'll strangle you today. It'll be less painful than dying from your aggravation. Paige, choked, couldn't speak. She could only emit a sound of hee-hee, struggling with her hands. She tried to pry Phoebe's hands apart, but it was futile. Soon, Paige's face turned purple, and her eyes began to roll back. Just as she was about to lose consciousness, Phoebe suddenly let go. Paige gasped for air heavily, coughing continuously. She looked up at Phoebe, her eyes filled with resentment. Mom, you almost strangled me to death. Phoebe sat on the ground, breathing heavily, with a somewhat vacant look in her eyes. She glanced at her own hands, then at Paige, and suddenly burst into laughter. Haha, strangle you? How could I possibly strangle you? You're my only daughter. Seeing Phoebe like this, Paige suddenly felt afraid and cautiously shrank into a corner, warily watching Phoebe. Having seen enough of the commotion, I picked up my kitten and pressed the call button. Hello, you two. Seeing you both alive really relieves me. Hearing my voice, they seemed to regain their strength instantly and glared at me under the surveillance. You vile woman, you lured us here on purpose. Where are you? Come and get us out. Save you? Why should I save you? I remember very clearly what you did to me back then, I said with a sneer. Phoebe and Paige turned pale upon hearing my words. They probably didn't expect me to bring up the past so directly. You can't just leave us to die. We're your family. Phoebe tried to appeal to me with familial love. Family, do you deserve to be called that? How you treated me then and now? I haven't forgotten, I mocked. Paige anxiously added, Natalia, I realize I was wrong. Please save us. If you get us out, I'll treat you well from now on and never bully you again. Watching their anxious and frightened expressions, I felt disgusted. They were begging me now only because they were desperate. Not because they truly recognized their faults. There's a small power bank behind the monitor. Charge your phone first, and I'll tell you what to do next. After hanging up the call, I got up and laid out the dinner I had prepared. Orleans roasted chicken, steak, matsutake soup, candied sweet potatoes, and pine nut corn. Paige soon called, but I rejected it and then unblocked her on Instagram. As soon as Paige connected the call, I immediately showed her the feast on my table. Seeing the spread of delicious food, Paige's eyes widened. I chuckled lightly, leisurely picking up a piece of roasted chicken and savoring its delightful flavor. My pleased expression clearly infuriated them both, and I watched them with a smile. The power bank only has 5% battery left, which I specially reserved for you. To see how much I am enjoying this, I showed Paige and Phoebe my stockpiled supplies with my phone, and their expressions grew even uglier. You never planned to help us, did you? Phoebe's tone was certain, and my smile cooled. Why would I have any reason to help someone who verbally claims to have raised me on behalf of my parents but in reality just wanted to swallow the inheritance and has abused me for years? You surely didn't think that you could keep this secret forever. Phoebe's eyes widened in shock, and I felt a surge of satisfaction. The warehouse door can be remotely controlled, and now it's time for you to pay the price. Thank you for showing me this great drama. Goodbye. As I spoke, I hung up the video call and without hesitation, I opened the remote app to close the rolling shutter door. Switching back to the surveillance monitor, I saw Phoebe and Paige staring blankly towards the door, the wandering zombies, hearing the noise, stiffly turned towards their location. Watching Phoebe and Paige on the monitor, I felt no ripple in my heart. They screamed in terror, running around frantically, but the zombies had already surrounded them. They had nowhere to escape. I sat quietly at the dining table, enjoying my meal, with the sounds of their desperate cries and the zombies growling in my ears. All of this, they brought upon themselves. I just wonder, when they watched me die in a past life, if they felt as exhilarated as I do now. Paige was lucky to mutate into a zombie after being bitten. She then joined the group feasting on Phoebe. Right before her death, Phoebe stared in agony until her own daughter tore off half of her face and stuffed it into her mouth as food. I'm not good at keeping pets, but feeding them daily seems to keep them alive quite well. The bunker is good, but it makes even a homebody like me occasionally miss my previous life. The internet has been cut off, leaving only the anime and comics I had downloaded for entertainment. I'm curious about the outside world, but more than curiosity, I prefer to stay hidden. With some luck, I might even survive the apocalypse. But at this moment, I noticed a self-made detection button lighting up red. A chill went through me. It's a thermal sensor that lights up whenever a living person is nearby. At times like this, I'm not afraid of zombies, but of living people. I immediately turned on the surveillance camera and saw several men in work clothes kicking the door and swearing. Damn, I knew I shouldn't have sold it earlier, letting that woman get the better deal. Big brother, can't we really get in? It's so dangerous outside, and it took us a lot of effort to find this place. Let me think, if not, we'll have to climb up. I made a hidden chimney on top. I don't know if it's been blocked. My eyes widened, and I immediately turned and ran behind. These men were the former owners of a hot pot restaurant, thinking of the bunker due to the severe zombie tide. But what chimney? I have no recollection of that. Then I remembered. I abruptly stopped my steps. When setting up the electrical grid, there was a spot where the turf was unusually soft, which I hadn't minded at the time. Thinking about it now, my heart raced as I retrieved the hand-drawn floor plan I had made, quickly pinpointing the location of the chimney, just as the store owner had said. The chimney was indeed very hidden, generally unnoticed. Of course, I wasn't kind-hearted enough to let them in. In these apocalyptic times, law is but a whisper, and I possessed ample supplies. At best, they'd kill me. At worst, recalling how I was bitten by zombies in a past life, I was determined not to let them in. I immediately found my toolbox and watched the monitor while those men cautiously searched for the chimney. I sped up, spraying strong glue inside the chimney wall. I carefully checked the soil around the chimney to ensure there were no other entrances or holes. I sealed the chimney mouth firmly with wire mesh, adding sharp nails as a precaution. Given the chimney's 90-degree angle, if they came down, they would have to jump down and then climb up to me. The short path leading to me was critical for my survival. The more nervous I got, the clearer my mind became, and I didn't forget to boil a pot of oil. If they appeared, they'd first get stuck by the glue and nails, and then what awaited them would be the hot oil. And not only that, I looked down at the samurai sword at my feet, stealing my heart. It's either them dead or me. I quickly prepared and directly activated the power supply of the electric grid. The grid lit up instantly, buzzing and flashing blindingly bright light. I held my breath nervously and watched every movement on the surveillance screen closely. The intruders were clearly startled by the sudden activation of the electric grid. They stopped in their tracks, their faces filled with panic. What the, caught in the trap. After two of them were electrocuted by the grid, they immediately rolled their eyes back and fell to the ground. The shop owner and his brother quickly stepped back, cautiously watching the scene unfold before them. Those two couldn't hold on. As smoke began to rise from their bodies, they fell heavily to the ground. Lifeless, watching the two bodies, I didn't let my guard down. There were still two more. Although they had lost two comrades, to them, the hope of life outweighed the death of their partners. Just as I expected, the shop owner and his brother stepped back, whispered amongst themselves, and then carefully used a stick to lift the wire of the grid. They only cleared a path wide enough for one person. likely thinking to leave the grid intact to prevent others from finding this place after they entered. Soon, I saw someone climbing up the chimney. He was adept, clearly not his first time doing something like this. My heart raced until he slid down to the bottom, facing me directly with a disgusting smile on his face. There really is a woman here, the man smirked, attempting to crawl towards me, but quickly realized something was wrong. Strong adhesive firmly stuck his clothes. And as he instinctively reached out, his hands also got stuck. With a forceful attempt to lift his upper body, his head smashed right into a nail above him. The moment the nail pierced his skull, blood gushed out, and he screamed in agony, unable to struggle anymore. Ah Biao, in a panic, the shop owner jumped down after him, landing directly on Ah Biao. Another agonizing scream echoed. The shop owner also realized something was wrong but still crouched over his brother, trying to bend over and look in my direction. Little girl, we just wanted a place to hide. We are not bad people. Once the zombie outbreak is over, we will leave. I used to own this shop. Don't you remember my voice? I looked at him coldly. I don't know. I only know that intruders die. Without hesitation, I poured boiling oil down. Pig-like screams immediately followed. I turned aside, grabbing the katana and keeping an eye on the monitor. As time passed, the outside screams and struggles gradually faded, leaving only faint moans and breaths. Turning back, I saw the motionless Ah Biao and the shop owner who seemed to still be breathing. Hesitating for a moment, I decided to put down the katana and pulled out a nail gun, firing in the direction of the shop owner. They died, and I had no regrets. I knew that if they had managed to come in, I would never have good days. It might have been even more miserable than in my previous life. I brought bricks and prepared cement, ensuring they were dead before starting to lay the bricks one by one, carefully covering each layer with cement. After making sure the entrance was completely sealed, I finally relaxed a bit. I spent a few more days rechecking the bunker, ensuring no one could enter again, and finally relaxed my tense nerves. Fortunately, after that, I never saw any living person again, yet, there was a faint hope in my heart, wishing to see more humans appear, proving that the horrific zombie outbreak had ended. Soon, a severe cold wave arrived, and through the surveillance, I knew that the zombies had lost their mobility due to the cold, with more and more falling nearby. Then one day, while I was helping a mother cat give birth and witnessing 5 little lives being born, I finally breathed a sigh of relief. After preparing a can of food for the mother cat, I was about to make some fish soup to replenish her body when I heard a crackling sound from the radio on the table. 5 months after the apocalypse, all channels had gone silent. The sudden noise froze me in my tracks. I held my breath and cautiously approached the radio. My heartbeat accelerated, fearing I might miss any word. Finally, the radio crackled with voices, intermittent but clear enough for me to catch bits of the broadcast. Fellow citizens, after months of relentless effort, our nation has finally developed a vaccine against the zombie virus. Hearing this, I was overwhelmed with emotion, nearly brought to tears. The existence of a cure for the zombie virus meant that humanity now had hope of overcoming this catastrophe. 3 months later, the last of the zombies was completely dealt with, and everyone was vaccinated with this special serum to prevent a secondary infection. The moment I stepped out of the quarantine facility, the sunlight hit my face, and I felt a sense of freedom and hope like never before. I knew the road ahead was still long. In the future, I must love myself even more.